So first of all, I would like to start off by saying thank you to the American Kinesiology Association for inviting me to be a panelist for this workshop, this session that seems to be focused on understanding students' perspectives on effective diversity, equity, and inclusion. So for question number one, my name is Lucida C. Gomez. My preferred pronouns are she, her. My ethnicity is Mexican. And my hometown is Santa Barbara, California, but I'm currently located at Auburn University working on my doctoral degree. And I am a first-generation college graduate from my family. In terms of question two, what are particular factors that have impeded my learning experience? I think it's important not to forget that a college or university setting is no exception to the racism that students are encountering as both micro and macroaggressions when working towards their desired and respective degrees. And whether a fellow colleague, instructor, or professor is making these comments intentionally or not, they are also contributing to an additional barrier that these students are encountering while they're trying to go through their degree and they're going through this learning experience. So it causes discomfort for this student within and outside of this course as they're trying to complete this degree and trying to get connections and trying to network. And I think it's important for faculty as well as fellow colleagues to understand the influence and the impact that their words are having on their fellow classmates, whether it isn't related to academia itself, but there are other factors that they themselves may be playing a role in kind of limiting the communication that a student might be having with them. I think it's very important that we keep in mind that there are other issues of racism that are occurring within the academic institution that we can work on improving and reflecting for ourselves as well as for our colleagues. As a student for myself personally, I found myself to be constantly exhausted by having to dissociate and compartmentalize myself for every single course that I'm taking, and then having to step away from the course and return into a sense of reality. The fact that we are in isolation, the fact that we are coping with many concerns that are surrounding COVID, as well as our finances, how our family is doing with COVID, and then on top of all of that, all the racism that we are witnessing on national television, on every media outlet that we encounter every day. And these are all things that make students have to kind of take a step back and try to remind themselves and take care of themselves, because this in itself is fatiguing each student as they're going through this academic system and is impeding their learning experience that's already rocky to begin with since we've started transferring into this virtual platform. So for me personally, these are the bigger things that are not necessarily related to academia, but cannot be forgotten from academia, that students have their own lives that are trying to cope with all these other issues as they're trying to finish that one course, trying to get through the course, trying to graduate on time, on top of all the other issues that may be present. So for question three, how have your professors been helpful during these times? So as I've said before, we are constantly being bombarded with never-ending racial violence that's occurring within the United States, and many students, particularly students of color, are fatigued mentally and emotionally as we cope with the state of this nation. And what I've appreciated from certain professors is that at the start of a class session, they acknowledge the current state of events, the struggles that we might be encountering, the lack of productivity that we have been hoping to see at this point and we have not seen, and the fatigue we may be experiencing as students and them as instructors. So while this does not fix our issues, it shows a sense of awareness from this instructor and professor to view their students more than what is offered from this course. So they're seeing and acknowledging everything that is occurring outside of this course. Again, not dissociating the course from what is actually occurring in life has been helpful for me. Also, another thing to keep in mind as an instructor, I think it's important, especially with COVID, when we've switched our teaching platforms drastically to change to virtual, Some instructors have not really made changes to their teaching styles or their teaching pedagogy. And if they don't want to change it, I think that's completely fine. But I believe that it is more imperative now that as an instructor or professor, they be very direct with their students on the first day of class of what their expectations are for their students and what the students should expect from them in order to create a bridge or better communication between both of them. And I think it's important for the instructor to hold themselves accountable. So creating an anonymous survey throughout the semester to see where you stand with your students and how they stand with the content, with your teaching style, and things to consider adjusting throughout the semester in order to help bridge this gap or barrier that your students may be encountering throughout the course itself would be beneficial for collectively getting all your students through the course. Before COVID, I know many professors could get away with saying it's in the syllabus, read the syllabus, but now more than ever, it's important to have a clear communication with your students to have them mentally prepared for what you want from them and from your course on that very first day. So just reiterating everything in a finite way, having all the details provided on that syllabus so that if you really do say it's in the syllabus, they can go back and read everything that's necessary on there. And know that you have mentioned this before, which although I know they probably have, it just gives you more time to communicate with them that first day instead of letting them go early because they should have read the syllabus beforehand and they probably did not. So I think those are things that might be helpful in order for a professor to kind of be more understanding and compassionate with their students on what's going on, especially in this pandemic quarantine virtual platform that we've been kind of forced into. In terms of question 4, what are some ways at the university or college that you attend could be more helpful? I believe it's important for each department at a college or university to provide continuous opportunity for their students to voice their opinions on the diversity, inclusivity, and equity within that department. So not just to collect this information, but to actually do something, make an effort to make these changes and communicate what these efforts are to the faculty and the students so that it can hopefully improve the engagement and sense of belonging for all these students within that department and have them know that their words are not just being used for them to say that they're doing great, but they're actually making the changes based on what these students have been asking for. And to kind of just throw out there as well, at Auburn University within the School of Kinesiology, we have now in place a student advisory committee, of which I am a fellow co-chair of, that is focused on enhancing and improving the diversity and inclusivity environments that we have in our School of Kinesiology. So this past semester, when it was implemented in fall, our main focus was creating a survey to gather a baseline understanding of how they perceive the diversity and inclusivity within this department. And then to go even further, what we can do to offer them opportunities for professional development so that they can be prepared for after they graduate. So this has been the first step. We had over 200 students that were undergraduates, masters, and doctoral students respond to this. And our next goal is to kind of have this information be sent off to our director and our fellow professors so that they can see what changes can be made on that end and how we can work on creating more professional development opportunities that students are interested in or feel that they need in order for them to continue succeeding either in higher academia or for future job avenues that they are applying to. And then for question number 5, if you could share any insight about your student experience during COVID with your professors, what would it be? What would you want them to know so they would understand about this time of your life? So with this quarantine and isolation and this pandemic, it's led personally for me many points of self-reflection and how I have forced myself to assimilate in higher education in order to be taken seriously as a woman of color, and then to continue potential networking opportunities from these interactions. So I don't want to lose an opportunity. And because of that, I've been in this constant state of fear prior to this quarantine, being viewed as another combative, angry woman of color that only speaks about diversity and equity. And because of that, I've held my tongue on various occasions when I know I should have stood up for something. And with quarantine, I've realized I can't do that anymore. I can't continue allowing these things to go unchecked and still feel that I have stayed true to who I am. And I've been fortunate enough to have a supportive faculty within my department and within the School of Kinesiology that have allowed me opportunities to speak out these concerns and wishes for better opportunities for our students. I want all students to have equal opportunities, and in order for that to happen, we need to know what all our resources are and how we can continue providing better resources for these students. So by talking with the department, we were able to create the student advisory committee to have students' needs and be met at all points. So we were working on getting an undergraduate within this committee. We currently have master's students and then doctoral students on this committee in order to get various viewpoints for inclusion. And at the end of the day, I think it's important for us to know that not all students will have that support system in place, and not all of them may feel they have access to a safe space, especially during these difficult times of quarantine. And I think it's important for a professor to really do their own self-reflections and assess the safe spaces that they've provided, not for some students, but for all of their students. At the end of their day, there will always be a power dynamic between you and your fellow students, whether they are doctoral, master's, or undergraduate students, whether they are doing research with you or whether they are just in your class. But if a student is ever brave enough to come talk to you about a personal issue or a moment that they felt belittled by you or a fellow colleague, I really hope that as an instructor, as a professor, that you can avoid getting defensive, listen to what the student is trying to tell you, because if they've come to you at this point, they've done their own reflection and have understood where they stand and what they don't want to continue happening. And hopefully it can be a moment of reflection for yourself to be able to communicate with this brave student to make sure that this misunderstanding, whether it was about race, whether it was about sex, whether it was about an issue on the way you had approached a specific topic, that it can create a better communication for you and the student, and for you to kind of reflect on an opportunity to not make this miscommunication occur with next generation of students that you are encountering. So I think it's important for professors not to forget that they themselves can continue reflecting and growing as individuals and being more compassionate and trying to see how they can do their part to be more inclusive for all types of students that they may be encountering, and not taking it to heart when students may not feel that their approach is the only way of approaching science or the only way of approaching academia. And priorities and being able to create an environment that is safe for all students to feel that they can move forward without feeling that they have to drop out because they don't match a specific view of what science should be or what academia should be. So I think it's important for all of us to do our own self-reflections and try to be a better version of ourselves.